Okay. We'd also like to welcome our radio listeners in Cincinnati, Ohio on Z98. And if you can hear us on the radio, you can hear us on the radio by going to z98fm.com. On Conversations with Tony Mobley today, we have Ms. Valary Olenik. And thank you, Valerie, so much for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you.
This
Thank you for
is,
having me.
I'm so happy to have you. This is episode 69 of Conversations with Tony Mobley. And I want to thank everyone for being a part of the journey. Watch live on YouTube or my website, conversationwithtonymobley.com. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by valued audio and visual professionals who meet daily on Office Hours Global, hosted by Alex Lindsay. Thank you again, Z98, LinkedIn Live, and YouTube. Conversations with real people. Last week, we had a conversation with my friend, Mr. Aaron Huslich. And I want to thank the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for all of their hard work. Okay, so here I go again. Go to Conversation with Tony Mobley, register for my interactive chat on Mukana, courtesy of Alex Lindsay and 090. For the Mukana chat, which will allow you to ask your questions, and those questions can be voted up and down. Also, you can go to our website. We want you to go to our website, Conversation with Tony Mobley. So now we are going to get into the questions, and we're going to ask Valerie our very first question. Who is Valary Olenik?
Wow, you could have started with an easier one than that, I think, but like the big philosophical questions, I guess. I would say Valary is ridiculously curious and helpful and quirky, and spends as much of her time as humanly possible trying to help people learn things and to get excited about learning and to make learning more engaging. So I would say that's the sort of short version of who she is, and the longer version is that she's somebody who has lived in a couple of different big cities that I think have very unique experiences. And I feel fortunate to have lived in two cities that offer so much diversity and opportunity, and there's just constantly things to try and experience, and conversations. I mean, these are just
Now you can't leave us hanging. You just can't say two cities and
well,
not go into the cities who they are.
That's true. That was not fair. That was like a little teaser, I guess. Well, I was born and raised in New Orleans, and so I lived there until I graduated from college, and then I moved to New York City originally because I was a professional. I was a performer. I was a dancer, musical theater, all of that sort of stuff. but I had gone to college and gotten a degree in management because my parents had sort of said, the dance thing is great. We don't want to discourage you from doing that, but you should have a backup plan. So let's have something else that's a little more practical, maybe. And that worked for me because I always kind of had one foot in the arts and one in the sciences, and so that actually I never fought about that. I thought that was good advice, and it has served me well because I just kept trying things. I would say Valary is a person who always raised her hand first when ever given the opportunity to go learn something new or try something, not really knowing how it was going to connect up with other things or if it was going to, and
Mm,
just it's I think there's a Steve Jobs quote from a commencement speech or something where he talks about that, like you can only see how the dots connect in hindsight. You can't always, some people have that life plan, and that's great. I was not one of those people that knew I wanted to be a doctor or knew I wanted to, follow a certain path. I sort of followed things that were interesting and fed my curiosity. And so I'm still doing that. I'm still sort of reinventing, and I think it served me well. I think I told people I had an unfair advantage during the pandemic because I was very adaptable. I was used to uncertainty. I was used to change, and so it just kind of took all those skills I had built, and I'm like, okay, I got this. I can do this because this is just the next challenge. This is just the next sort of thing. So that's how I got over the years, wound my way through various things, ended up in corporate training, then kind of looked at that and said, we can do better than what we're doing,
mm,
and started looking at things. And I said, well, how can we use emerging technology? How can we use social media? How can we use gamification? How can we use creativity? And so that's kind of where I am now. That's kind of the intersection that I live on now, I guess. So.
okay. So the next question is, what lessons have you learned from your parents that you're currently using today?
Oh my goodness. I lost my father many years ago, but I would say there's no shame in hard work, no matter what the job is. My father had I probably take after him in this respect. He had many, many different jobs over his life, everything from being a cartographer for the Army Map Service to a bartender to, at about 50 years old, being overqualified for positions that were available in New Orleans when, after he and my mom had moved there right before I was born. And at about 50, he ended up taking a job at a lumber yard doing manual labor. There was no
Mm,
shame in that. That was, I never had any feeling that that was less than some other job he did. I saw the value of hard work, and but also he was also, not to take myself too seriously, because I can do that sometimes, and I think that's one of from him. That's probably two of the big ones. And then my mother, who is still with us, she has been through quite a lot of trauma in her life, and natural disasters. And I mentioned earlier, she Katrina in New Orleans, and lots of things, and hit by a car. And so she had always taught me, and she was a school teacher years ago. She had always taught me that you could learn something from everybody. There was always something that could be learned from any person that you met. And I think that's one of the reasons I love what you're doing with the conversations, because everybody has a story. Everybody has something of value that we can learn from. And it may be what
absolutely.
to do and what not to do. And, it can go in a lot
Yeah.
of directions. But I would say that, and I would say also just a deep respect for people, for getting to know who the people are, and I guess, and helping. I was always, the helper. I'm a little,
Thank you.
I was a little past the Mr. Rogers era. I didn't grow up with Mr. Rogers, but like, I know he talks about that a lot, like look for the helpers, and, I can relate to that. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And the next question is, now this will probably make you laugh. Can you share how you got your nicknames, Maven of New Thinking and the MacGyver of Training?
Yeah, well, the MacGyver of training, it just comes from, I've worked in a lot of environments and worked with people in a lot of environments where we don't always have a lot of resources. We don't always, we can't go out and buy the next bright, shiny new, tool or whatever. But I was trying to help people see the value in what they already have and using things in different ways and using it more creatively. And so, kind of in the spirit of MacGyver, how I was like, okay, what do you got? Whenever we were like designing some training pros, like, okay, well, what do we have? What do we have to work with? And sometimes people would get frustrated with me when I would go speak at conferences, and they'd be like, well, what tool should I use? And I'm like, I can tell you what tool to use. Like, what do you have? Maybe you need to go find something else, but there's just so much. There's so much creativity and so much innovation that can come out of repurposing and just using what we have in different ways. So that's where the MacGyver part came out. The Maven of New Thinking was just that I never outgrew the childhood questioning. Well, why not? Why, people will say, we can't do that. And I'm like, well, why not? Let's push the thinking, how can we expand the thinking a little bit? And I do now, one of my many hats, I do help facilitate a program on in and out of the box thinking. And so the whole thing, the whole point of that one is just the mindset shifts that can happen when we sort of examine our thinking and realize that to make progress in any way, we have to let go of some of that old thinking, and we have to open up to new possibilities, and then that way we can move forward. So yeah, so that's the Maven of New Thinking. And it
That's
just, a
very
friend
cool.
used it one time, and I was like, that's really cool. I like that. And so it kind of stuck, and yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I've had the benefit of we've been talking for at least a month now, right?
About that, yeah. Yeah.
And you want to share how we connected?
I would love to, because it was one of those just happy little coincidences, I guess we could say.
Hmm.
I was hosting. I'm on the board at the U.S. Distance Learning Association, and so we are a nonprofit association, and we advocate and talk about all the different constituencies that use distance learning. So I think that's one of the nice things about it, is that it's not specific to higher ed or specific to K-12 or corporate or anything like that. We get that nice cross pollination of ideas. I always get to talk to different people, and I'm always encouraging people. And that's kind of back to the new thinking. I'm always saying, well, don't, like at the conferences, don't just go to the sessions that are in your track. Like, look at the sessions in the other tracks, because there's so much value in what is this person doing that you could use in maybe a slightly different way. And I've learned from so many people there. But we run free Friday webinars, and so I've been moderating most of them, and I love that. I love doing it because I get to meet all these amazing people, like I met you. You actually attended one of the webinars, and I
Yes,
always
I did.
encourage people to, ask questions. We hang out a little bit afterwards if anybody wants to stay. you know, network a little bit or just continue the conversations of whatever the topic was that day. And that day they were talking about inclusive student mentorship was the topic. And so so that's how it happened, because you were one of the participants, and you very graciously stayed afterwards and participated in conversation, which was lovely, because some sessions people a little, they don't talk as much, and I make the offer, I try to open the space and make the invitation, but you know, I can't force people to participate if they don't want to.
Well,
But I was
let me
fascinated. I was fascinated
let me
because
share this with
yeah.
you. You were very extremely welcoming, and I felt extremely comfortable having a conversation with you in that setting. And so as we were having that conversation, I was like, yeah, I need to see if she's willing to come and participate in conversation with Tony Mobley. Um, and so we're going to get into the U.S. distance learning program in a few minutes, but I just wanted to say I enjoyed it immensely, and an office hours member sent me the link to the meeting, and it was so funny. I had just found the link myself on LinkedIn. So I found the link on LinkedIn, and then they sent me, A. Mitchell's sent me the link um, almost at the same time. And so I didn't have a choice but to go in, because I understand those kinds of things as signs. And I, you know, I went immediately to the link, and I listened, and I was just going to listen. I was not going to participate. I just wanted to check it out. And then you just kept talking, and your voice is so soothing
Aw,
and welcoming. And so I couldn't help but participate. So, and that's how it happened. So, again, thank
goodness.
you again for being who you are.
Oh,
I just wanted to say that, and I'm so glad that had this opportunity to have a conversation.
oh my goodness,
And
thank
so,
you.
yeah,
Oh,
so our friend Taylor that you met before our conversation started is coming in from Cincinnati, Ohio, and he has a question for you.
ooh.
He says, "Have you always enjoyed helping people? What is your favorite way to help people?"
Oh, wow, that's a good one. That is a good one. But before I answer that, I have to thank you. I have to thank you for that feedback that you gave me about the session you attended, because um I'm just I yeah, I'm sitting here. I'm a little I'm very touched by it, because that's something that I've worked on, is creating those spaces. And I remember that day, because I remember that I was trying to push the conversation a little bit gently, because I didn't feel that it was kind of going deep enough in the right direction. I'm just going to say that, but so I really appreciate the fact that you felt welcomed there, and so
I
I hope
did.
to continue. I hope to continue that. I do. I've learned that is a skill that I've had some very good mentors over the course of the pandemic that I've watched, and I've always been a very observant. I've always been very observant. I was a very quiet child. Um, so anyway, thank you. Anyway, I'm going to answer the question now, because Taylor asked a question. So I would say um, uh, most of my focus, I think my favorite way of helping people is to uh, I have to admit, most of it's on the educational side. Most of it is trying to help people realize that they can do things, that they can, um, you know, that like being that cheerleader, I think in some ways is so powerful. Of there's a lot of people who, you know, maybe want to do it, and they just need somebody to help them get to the right resources or help them get started. And so I was always that kind of helper, um, of, you know, I'll help you, you know, I'll help you get started. I I apparently got well, not apparently, I did get kicked out of kindergarten, because
No, you have to tell that story.
I was apparently helping all the other kids, and and the teacher was kind of like, "This is great. I have like a little helper, but I don't think she's getting much out of this." Because I was like going around. I'm like, "Oh, you need your bow tied, or you need help with your your letters," and so apparently I just went around and tried to help. So it's always been, I think, in that. Um, Inspiring curiosity, that just to show people that if they're just willing to explore a little bit of the curiosity that we all have, and that they can just do these really amazing things. So again, I guess I'm simple. I'm really simple. I like the little, just a small action, or just a small um, I think it can make such a difference. Just, yeah, I'm not sure if it's
I
anything other than
think
that.
I think that Valerie, you come across as extremely genuine, and I think that that goes a long way for people to be willing to risk interacting with you. And I think that that is the way in which you're able to help people, because a lot of times human beings need help, and we don't share things because we don't believe that anyone is genuinely interested in what our problems are or what our needs might be. So that when we have an opportunity to interact with someone that is genuinely interested in us and really means us good, which is something that is sort of lacking in this time in which we live, it it is something to be cherished and to be appreciated. So I just wanted to say that. And I have no agenda. I'm not trying to just butter you up.
uh,
Um, but really, it's really difficult to find people that are sincere, and we were talking in one of the early episodes, one of the first conversations with Tony Mobley, and I think I was sharing with someone, a lot of times people will ask someone how they're doing routinely, and they won't wait for an answer, and so a lot of times people just give a response because they don't think that someone genuinely wants to know. And so I had someone say to me when I was really struggling at one time, you know, I'm asking you how you're doing, and I really want you to tell me.
yeah.
And so that is the spirit in which, and I've known you for a long time, but just based on our interaction and how we have been texting back and forth and emailing and everything, there's a genuineness that you have, and I understand um, how you were able to help people. So um, I I want to, at this point, I want you to share a little bit about. I know we have a lot of questions, but I think it's important for you to share, if you're willing to, at this point, to share what you're going to be talking about this coming Friday.
Ooh, that's excellent. Yes, this Friday I feel very fortunate, and I think it may have been partially as a result of my genuine request to this person. You use the word genuine, and I think that um, we have Judy Katz coming in to talk about um, um, creating learning experiences for ADHD and autistic learners. And this was a topic that had been requested. It was a topic that um, we had touched on I think the last time we did a webinar on it, honestly, was maybe 18 months or so ago. We'd had Cade Friedman come in from NYU, who works on neurodivergence with children. She works with small children primarily. And but Judy Katz is coming in. Judy Katz, if you have not been to her website, she is autistic and has ADHD, and she is I think she's trying to see if people are or not willing, but what the level of interest is. She's out there trying to build her brand and share her knowledge. And I had seen her on the program at a conference earlier in the year that we had both spoken at, and because of a conflict, I was not able to go to her session, but I had spoken to other people who knew her, and I knew she was just amazing. And so I just very boldly but humbly went and contacted her and just said, would you at all consider, and I she you have to have those awkward conversations like, well, we don't have any money to pay you, and we're a nonprofit, we're hoping you'll donate this hour for us. And she of course said yes, and she will be there on Friday. So we really have been trying to serve everyone. I mentioned earlier that we serve all constituencies, but within those constituencies, there's all these different groups that have special need. And I don't mean special needs from a disability or special education, but we all have special needs that for where we are, and where we're trying to go. And so I thought that was I'm very excited that she's going to be there. And then the following week, we're going to have Alan Natachu, who is probably one of the most passionate people on the planet about accessibility. So I think just having those two back to back is going to be quite there's going to be just
Absolutely.
so much we're going to learn from both of them. So
Can you share the link again? It's a Zoom webinar.
Yes, if you just go to USDLA.org, there's a banner that will take you. You can go to resources, and there's webinars, and right there it'll let you register. And again, they're all free and recorded and all the usual stuff.
Well, thank you for sharing that. The next question is from Taylor Sunderhouse, Cincinnati, Ohio. Do you enjoy scavenger hunts?
I do. I love all kind of games, and I think scavenger hunts are amazing. And I think there's actually also, they're not just fun. We were talking earlier about, like my sort of personality. I am non-threatening. I am the person that everybody stops and says, will you please give me directions or take our picture or whatever, because I don't look like I'll run off with their phone. And but fun is one of those things that like makes people more willing to try things. If you can make it a little engaging, if you can make it a little more fun. Fun's a little tricky because it's different for everybody. Everybody's definition of fun and what they like and don't like is very unique. But scavenger hunts are cool because there's actually science behind the idea that you actually learn more. There's actually there's been professors that have like done side-by-side tests and have had students like read some text and then give them a quiz, like the usual sort of traditional learning stuff. And then they have like given them a scavenger hunt to go on or something. And then when they test them, like even later, the information from the scavenger hunt they remember, and they've really learned a lot more of it. So So I think I like it both from a just a fun standpoint, but I also just love the fact that using gameful ideas and things like scavenger hunts is also just such a powerful and non-threatening way to get people into learning experiences and get them to try some new things that they wouldn't maybe ordinarily try. So yeah, scavenger hunts would be high on my list of things that are pretty cool.
Okay, and Taylor's back with another question on what is your favorite tech gadget?
Oh my God. I think right now it's probably just my phone. Um, just because I can do so much with it. I can connect with the world, and it's just kind of magical that all the things that I can just do with that little simple device that uh yeah, just I'm gonna go with phone. I mean, I know it's kind of a lame answer, but because I know.
It's not a lame answer, and I'm going to tell you why. I work with a house of worship. It's a community that I started working with after the pandemic started, and it was an elderly population, and they needed to be able to have services. And the only reason I'm mentioning this is because my conversation with them and just about anybody who I interact with, I'm always constantly saying to them, it is not a phone. It is a computer that you make phone calls with. It is a camera that you make phone calls with. It is more powerful than the rockets that took man to the moon.
Yeah.
And so when you think like that, then you recognize the power of it. So it's not a weak answer at all. So I just wanted to make sure that I got that in. John Snyder, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of information behind the curtain, Valary. So John Snyder reached out to me last night and wanted to ask you this question last night. And so I'm going to put you on the spot from the standpoint of John Snyder is my guest for next week.
Oh,
So since he's asking you a question this week, I'm going to ask you to at least ask him one question next week if you can. So John Snyder's question is, how do you keep gamification fun for participants when it often becomes cold? I can't see that. I'm sorry. Cold as paint on a spreadsheet? Do you
okay.
understand?
Yeah, a coat of paint. I get it. Okay. So I get where he's going. I get where he's
Okay.
going. Um, yeah, it's well, okay. Well, first I have to say what I would include in gamification would go far beyond what a lot of people would. And I agree with
Mm.
John that a lot of it is, to use the Jesse Shell analogy, it's putting chocolate on broccoli, which I think is where he's going with the coat of paint on the spreadsheet. And I think part of it has to do with when I work with people on gamification, I tell them, first of all, that gamification is not about making everything into a game. It's not about just making things fun. If people come to me and say, I want to use gamification because it's going to make this fun, that to me is a red flag, because usually that means there's something in the design that we need to be looking at, that there's probably some design problems. If they're just like, oh, just need to make it fun, if we throw some chocolate on it, it's going to be great. But if we think about gamification instead as this beautiful collection of all these disciplines from behavioral sciences and creativity and instructional design, and we put this all together and we say, this is about a learner. This is about a person. So back to his question of how do you keep it fun for participants? You first have to very clearly establish who those participants are. Like who is that audience? Because what I'm going to use for one audience is going to be very different than what I'm going to use for a different audience. So I always tell people, like, not just knowing the audience, but respecting the audience, because the big mistake most people make with gamification is they just start throwing points and badges and leaderboards and things around. And they're like, oh, yep, we gamified it. It's great. And they're not really looking at the people. So instead, if they would look at things like, first of all, understanding that you can't use one size fits all, that within any group, you're going to have some people who like this type of thing and some people who like this type of thing, and that there's all these different types of engagement. There's the cognitive engagement, and there's the social engagement and emotional engagement, and all these different types. And so what you start thinking about is, what are ways that I can help people see their progress, stay engaged with it? And so if I have to be very clear about what I'm going for, what my goal is. So what I usually do to keep it fun is I offer them a variety of things. First of all, I like to give them choice in some way. So choice in how they participate, choice of activities, choice of how they demonstrate their mastery. If we're talking about a learning experience, something like that, that's always really powerful. Also, using things like surprise and delight. Those things may seem like trivial things, but again, when you go back to the sciences, surprise does this magical thing in the brain where it literally stops thinking. It overrides all other thinking when somebody encounters something that's surprising, because then the brain has to stop and go, how does this fit? Like, wait a minute, I got to make sense of this. And that sort of wakes people back up and makes them curious. So I like to focus on things like that. I like to give them various different ways that are going to align with different types of engagement. A lot of use of story. If you think about a lot of video games in particular, they're part of stories. When you put people into a story, it's a very different experience, because you're now controlling the action and you're now participating in it. And so all of those ways, I would say, yeah, choice, surprise, story, giving them a clear, making progress visible is one of my mantras, is always. That is one of the most powerful things to people. There's a book called the Progress Principle, and it was like the most motivating thing for people in workplaces was not like, oh, everything went great and we're all happy. It was, we have managers that help us see that we're making progress, that, they help us, they facilitate actions getting taken. And every day is not going to be a good day, but as long as people can see that they're making progress, because that's part of it. People get stuck if they don't see that there's some reason for them to be doing it, or that it's mattering, or that it's helping, or that they're getting anywhere. So I think that's it. Just you have to know the audience, know what the goals are, and then you have to make decisions that will help them to get to the goals. And then you'll make better choices.
It sounds like you're talking specifically about engagement, that the gamification has to have a component of it that requires engagement. And the other piece to it seems to be that there needs to be a customization for the game, and that cookie cutter games are not going to work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it doesn't even have to be a game. It can just, sometimes it's things that appear gameful. Sometimes it's giving people a map so that they are very clear on the actions they're supposed to take and where they're supposed to go and what they're supposed to be participating in. And So yeah, I view it as a really just hugely open landscape of opportunities. And yeah.
Very cool.
But
Thank
thank you,
you.
John.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
And John is back with another question. How is gamification any different than putting barriers in place to make things harder for the sake of challenge?
Ooh, he's breaking out the good questions. Wow. Well, I think the difference, I mean, yes, if we're talking about strictly a game, one of the definitions of a game is that it has obstacles. That's what makes something a game. They often use the analogy of like golf. The point of golf is to put a ball in a hole. The easy thing to do would be to pick the ball up, walk over, and drop it in the hole, but that wouldn't be a game. I make it hard. I give you a long stick with, you have to hit the ball and it has to go a long way, and there's all these obstacles. But I think
Mm,
when we're talking about whether it's game-based learning or gamification of learning or any of those pieces, yes, there's challenge, but the whole process of learning is challenge. There's got to be some struggle. There has to be some friction, or there's no learning. We're just kind of reviewing things we already knew. We're not actually learning something new if we're not having some level of struggle. But what games and gamification can do is work to get people into that flow state where they go, okay, this is a challenge, but it's doable. I believe that I can actually achieve this. Otherwise, they won't play. If they think it's not fair, or they think that there's no way to win the game, they're not gonna do it. Or I can never learn this. I'm stupid, or I'm all those horrible thoughts that people say to themselves when they think they can't learn something. But if you can get people and you can show them you can help them overcome the challenges, and then you sort of scaffold those and make them a little bit harder and harder and harder, and then continue to show them, well, look how far you came. Like, what used to be really hard isn't hard anymore. So it's not about putting barriers just for the sake of putting barriers. The barriers are quite often milestones that allow us to see our competence, that we've now achieved something. So I think for me, that's the difference. It's not, I'm always very intentional. It's like, why is that in there? Why am I using that in this design? If it doesn't serve some purpose in helping this audience get to the goals, then it shouldn't be in there. And if the only reason is because, oh, I thought that would be kind of cool, or that's just, to make it a little harder. So I think for me, that's sort of the difference. Is it's not just, it's never for just the sake of making it a challenge. It's we to achieve anything is a challenge. There's going to be some level of challenge to it, but we want to facilitate them getting to the win, we'll say. So I don't ever want to put just false barriers, I guess, in there. But I hope that
thank you. Thank
that
you for sharing
got
that.
around to some of his question there.
Please share anything you want about job training and life coaching.
Ooh. I wish that people in the workplace would stop saying they're going to send people to training, because it sounds like a punishment. And that
Mm,
they would start to and it has been used sort of punitively over the years in different places that I've seen. You didn't know how to do that, you get sent to training. um, there's some new process that's going to make your life more difficult, at least in the short run, so you have to go to training. It always it's sort of positioned as this, like, uh, first of all, it's positioned as this place that's not part of work. It's like a separate entity. And so what I really appreciate is when people start to embed things better and put them together in ways where we all see that it's all a lifelong learning process. And I think part of the challenge of that is in job training, particularly, is in the US anyway, we are really failure averse, and it's very hard to get people to try things in some cases and to be innovative when they also have this sort of fear of I can't go too far because I might mess up and I'm going to get in trouble if I mess up. And so I think I think that's just, if I could change one thing about job training, that would kind of be in that space. That back to our earlier conversation, I don't think many people don't feel that job training is a safe place, and training and learning in general needs to be a safe place to experiment and to make those mistakes so that we don't make mistakes when when it's in a more, I don't want to say high pressure, but in a higher stakes situation. Um,
Yeah.
I mess up in class, don't mess up with the client. Um, you
Right.
know,
Which makes
to
sense. Absolutely.
but we don't. I don't think we do that as well as we could. And yeah, life coaching. I same sort of thing. I think people. I wish I wish more people sought it out. To me, it's life coaching again is kind of a big space that I think encompasses a lot of things. But um, I hope we start to have more of those conversations around um, coaching and mentoring, and how people work together in non-formal ways necessarily. I mean, a coaching situation could be formal, but also just um, yeah, just sort of, it's almost, it's in some ways I think connected to our discussions around mental health. Like life coaching, people want to do better, people want to advance and succeed, and they need help with it. They don't always know how to ask, who to ask. um, and so I think that's an interesting space to kind of see how that uh, develops
Yeah.
over
I
time.
think that we're talking about the same thing that we were talking about earlier in terms of the ground or the space being fertile enough for people to be willing to risk sharing the need for help or support, to continue to move on and to get better. And it's okay. We think about the great Michael Jordan, all the times that he failed. He didn't make the varsity team, when he first tried. And so failure is in some ways one of the best tools for learning. That is definitely something that um, this community office hours um, does. We try stuff, we and we had a couple of failures in this conversation tonight, but we're going to learn from them, and they're going to be things that um, I'm giving you a little scene behind the curtains. One of the streaming platforms is not working right now, but if you're watching this and you're seeing it on the platform, then you know that we got it fixed or we worked it out. But the interesting thing for me is I am thinking about how going forward we might be able to get around that. So it was only because of the failure that this conversation is going to get better. So thank you so much
Exactly. Exactly.
for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Thank you.
We have a question from Laura Thompson. Can you explain to those who don't know what a coaching session is like?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can speak for mine. I know different people have sort of different approaches to this, but when I say I do coaching, a lot of times what that means is people come to me because they want help figuring out the direction to go. So they want help strategizing. Maybe they're designing something and they need some assistance. So I'm not actually the one that's going to build it for them. I'm not necessarily going to give them all of the answers. I'm going to help them. So basically, I'm going to ask a really lot of questions, and I'm going to help them to clarify what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And then there is some component to it. The types of coaching sessions I'm doing, there usually is some component of maybe me suggesting certain resources or have you considered this. So not telling them what to do necessarily, but again, helping them sort of open up some ideas about avenues that they could check into. Getting them, again, helping them to sort of clarify their thinking around whatever their topic is. So, like I had a coaching session with a wellness professional who was going to be working, she was working on an event, like a summit, and she had some ideas of how she wanted to incorporate certain gameful elements, and she wanted to make it more, more engaging, as we talked about, and things like that. So as we talked about it, I first, it was like just helping her sort of clarify what her intentions were, what her goals were, and then making sure that the decisions that she was making, not decisions I was making for her, but decisions she was making, were in alignment with that. So for example, at one point, she said, she was talking about something about a competition. And I just said, okay, I said, well, have you thought about, you are very competitive. Are all of the people there going to be very competitive? Or is that something that might not appeal to them? Might they want an alternative, not to say you can't do both, but have you considered doing some collaborative activities for those who would prefer a more social interaction than a competitive? And she admitted, she's like, yeah, I'm competitive. And, so that's just kind of where her thinking went, which makes perfect sense. And most of us, if we design things, it's very hard to get out of that. I'm designing what I
what
like.
we want, what
It's
we
like, but
want it
that's
to
what
be
I would
about.
like. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's about what we want.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by
We,
the end, they would have some action, they would have a clearer plan, I guess, would be the end result, hopefully, by the end of a session.
that's very cool. Valor, we were running out of time. So what I
Okay.
want you to do before we have a few more questions that I want to get to. But before we do that, I want you to share those links, your website, personal website, and the organizations that you are a part of, so that those who are listening on the radio and those who are watching on YouTube can have that information.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can please reach out to me. You can find me pretty much everywhere on social media, LinkedIn. Just look for my name as it is on the screen. My website is Valary, Valary, with WITH, AY, spelled WHY, because again, always very curious and trying to help people also find their why they're doing things. So that's Valary with AY. Also, please go to USDLA.org and see all the things we have offered there. The second week of November, the 7th through the 11th, we have a full week of free webinars on leadership topics in the distance learning space, in addition to the topics that we talked about earlier. Also, my other big one would be the box experience, and you can also just find out about that on my website. So if you start there, it will you can navigate yourself to other information from there about that. So,
And
or just reach out to me.
the next question is, what is the box experience?
The box experience is a workshop, and it was started by what we affectionately joke is my brother from another mother. He has lived in Taiwan for the past 30 years. He's actually from Seattle originally, but he created this program called the Box Experience, and it's about thinking in and out of the box. And it is it's done in person, it's done virtually. We have all sorts of options, but the whole premise of it is that it's about mindset shift, because so many topics, whether we're talking about change management or we're talking about it's used in team building, it's used in creativity and innovation spaces, it's used in diversity and inclusion, it's used in just a whole host of different settings. But the premise is the same, that our thinking is that we all have this this box that we live in. It's our current state of thinking. And in order to make change, in order to get to that future state, solve that problem, whatever it is that we're focused on that day, you have to examine the box. We have to understand that we show the world one vision of ourselves, and there's another vision of ourselves that's in our heads. And it also builds empathy, because when we sort of examine ourselves in that way, we start to understand that, yeah, you know what, if I have a box on my head, and we literally do have boxes, which are part of the workshop that we wear at times. But then we start to realize, if I have this box that is both good and challenging, so do you. And so it builds empathy, because then people start to realize, yeah, I filter how I communicate with you based on my experiences and all those things, and so do you. So so it's a really impactful program, and I'm proud to be part of it, because I've just seen, it's one of those things, I've seen the change in people when they go through it. So that's the short
Share
version.
the link to the box link once more,
Oh
please.
goodness. Yes, if you go to my website, there's a section on the Box Experience, but you can also go to Innograte, INNOGREAT.com, and there's more information about the box there as well. So yeah, definitely check it out. There's actually an option to book a discovery call there, and gives you a nice little preview video and everything. So
Yeah, I just want to say to our radio listeners, we may drop off, but I encourage you to. We have a couple of questions that I really think are important left. So if you don't get it on the radio, I ask you to come to YouTube and check it out. So this is the next question: what is involved in being a director in the United States Distance Learning Association?
well, first, it is there's about 20 of us that serve as the board. So part of ours is a traditional board function of just being the the fiduciary sort of gatekeepers of the association, ensuring that it is operating and continuing in its mission. Many of us on the board also chair committees, so that we help with particular functions. So we have state chapters, we have events like the webinar that we met at, and conferences and things. So we have various different committees. We have committees on public policy. We focus strongly on that. We have a public policy forum every year, and then sometimes a smaller one, sort of 6 months out, to sort of keep the conversation going. So it's sort of, there's sort of the larger board, and then we sort of break into committees to help with the operation of the organization, and to just get the word out and introduce the organization to people, participating in conversations like this, sharing things through our social media communities, to bring new voices in, and new people into the USDLA community.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And so, what are you most concerned about for the future?
Oh
I
my
always ask
goodness.
that question.
Oh my, I know. And I'm like, and it just every day it just feels, um, I, my concern is that we are losing, and that's why I'm so proud to be here. I think we're losing the ability to have difficult conversations, that we're losing the ability to disagree respectfully and have uncomfortable discord. And because so often it's just people saying the same thing from different angles, and we're just creating this we're adding to the tension that there's just so much going on in the world right now, and we have big challenges that we can't Google the answers for. We need people to be
Mm.
working together, and to do that they have to be able to work together, and just the yeah, the divisions, and yeah, I think that is one of the ones that just always is just so front and center for me, is just um and it sounds, sometimes it's people think it sounds a little naive or something, but it's like just taking a breath and having some kindness and just listening, like, because so often it's there's agreement in the noise, but we just can't we get in our own way so much as humans, and yeah, I'm not sure how to.
We don't recognize that we have more in common than we don't. And
Yeah.
part of the reason for this conversation, this series, Conversation with Tony Mobley, is it's not about me. It's about people being able to talk to one another and trying to get past those things that separate us. Because the reality is that we have more in common than we realize, but we let those things that keep us separated
Yep.
get in the way. So I just want to say thank you so much for that. Um, our final question is, you're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know?
I want them to stop and just find that small moment, that there's so much beauty and possibility in the world, and that despite all that stuff I just said and all the drama and you know uh, things going on in the world, that I am I am an eternal optimist, in the sense of I know that if we just try, that things will be so much better, and we have so much untapped potential. And I just want to encourage anybody who is thinking about trying something to try it, because you just never know. You never know where it can lead, and you never know who it can impact, because I've shared things online at various times and had people come back, and I thought it was just the most insignificant little thing, and it meant something to somebody. So try things and share, and just, yeah, a little more love.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just important for us to risk, being willing to risk, being willing to fail. This whole experience has been, um, you know, our part of our conversation before we started conversation with Tony Mobley tonight was, you were talking about the infrastructure and how things looked and the team and all the great things about it. But beyond that, before we got to this point, there were so many failures. There were so many things that went wrong. there were a lot of things that didn't work right. And so it's okay that you can fail and learn from it and grow from it. So Valerie, I would just want to say thank you so much for being with me again tonight. Um, this has been a great conversation. Thank you. And I look forward to our next conversation. I know that we're going to have another one sometime soon. And so thank you so much. And I want to go at this time and just thank all of those who support Conversation with Tony Mobley. I'm going to start with Kimberly Mobley, Ron Mobley, Global Family and Friends, Alex Lindsay, Office Hour members, DVE Store, Liminal Entertainment Technologies, Byte Hive, Video 360, ApproveAlone.com, Cloud Bedrock LLC, Ken Jordan, Jonas Dattel, Aaron Husledge, Sherrick Cheetah, David Brady, Marcus Lee Folk, Richard Lavery, Chris Fenwick, Manolo Lozano, Jeffrey Powers, Bo Cordell, Mickey McAchore, Hasmont Guyshaw, Doug Moeller, Laura Thompson, Brian Shan, Dennis Champion Walker, Roscoe Jones, George Butters, Joshua Minden, Daniel Maxwell, Taylor Sunderhouse, Adrian Allbeck, Michael Marr, Zachary Sorensen, and Conversations with Tony Mobley producer, Clylock Miguel Lopez Waterman. Thank you all so much for participating in this conversation. Thank you, 98.1 FM radio in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you, Taylor Sunderhouse and the team behind the radio station for their support of Conversation with Tony Mobley being on the air in Cincinnati and on the internet. Next week, my conversation will be with educator, trainer, John Snyder. Please come back and participate in that great conversation that we're going to have next week. And upcoming conversations will include conversations with educators, mental health, filmmakers, musicians, and other creators. And one of the things that I did not get a chance to ask you tonight about was you being a geek and artist. And so we're going to get to that in our next conversation. Again, thank you all so much for being with us tonight. Take care. Thank you again, Valerie. Good night. Bye-bye.